the white people were unruly. The law was called, but the black people got arrested.
You said you knew the playbook.
No, but I want you to say it. don't code it.
I thought we had established that already. So I mean, I can say yes. They were their show in their space that they owned. That the black people owned this space where they were performing, and when unruly white patrons disrupted their show, it was the black performers that were arrested and taken to jail. When they were taken to jail, they were told they would not be released unless they promised to never speak Shakespeare again.
We'll discuss race and how it plays a factor, and how we didn't even talk about this topic because we were afraid.
A Black Executive Perspective.
BEP is on fire. Our audience is growing fast and the impact is real. Now is the time for your brand to grow with us and reach a highly engaged, influential community with real spending power. Don't miss this moment. Email us today at media@TonyTidbit.com. Let's make it happen and put you and your brand in front of the people that matter. We are coming to you live from the BEP studio for another thought-provoking episode of a Black Executive Perspective podcast. Safe space where we discuss all matters regarding race, culture, and those uncomfortable topics people tend to avoid. I'm your host, Tony Tidbit. So before we get started on this fantastic episode, we want to remind everyone to check out our partners at Code M Magazine, whose mission is to save the Black family by first saving the Black man. Check them out at codemmagazine.com. That is codemmagazine.com. So today, I'm with Dr. Monica White Ndounou, an award-winning scholar, director, and cultural visionary, to talk about Black theater as both a business and a lifeline for Black history, culture, and futures. From the African Grove Theater in 1821 to Black Theater Day today, we unpack how Black theaters have always been gathering spaces, cultural archives, and hubs of resilience, yet remain underfunded and under threat. We'll discuss why investing in Black theaters is not charity, but strategy, and how one of us can play a role in sustaining this living museum for our collective story. So let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Monica. Dr. Monica is Associated Professor of Theater at Dartmouth College, affiliated faculty in film, media, and African American and African Studies, and the founder and president of the Craft Institute and the International Black Theater Summit. She has served in the national leadership roles with Black Theater Association, AITHA, the August Wilson Society, and the Black Seed, an actor, director, producer, and award-winning author of Shaping the Future of African American Film. Her work spans stage, screen, and scholarship. She has co-founded CreateEnsemble.com, a digital platform for creative artists of color, and is currently developing Acting Your Color during her Newhouse Fellowship. Dr. Monica's mission is clear: to ensure Black theaters and artists thrive because our stories cannot be erased. Dr. Monica, welcome to a Black Executive Perspective podcast, my sister.
Thank you so much for having me, Tony.
My sister, I am so glad you are here. I mean, I have been looking forward to this since we've chatted, a month or two ago. What you're doing is fantastic. But more importantly, when we think of Black theater, let me just state my ignorance. I don't even think of Black theater. Okay. I don't know the history of Black theater. I know my man, I forget, and I don't want to get too far. We'll get into it a minute ago, but I forget the brother's name. But whatever, it doesn't matter. But you're here to educate us on this wealth of history, like you said, a museum. And then more importantly, why we need to pay attention and make sure especially in today's world, that we make sure it doesn't go away. So I've been looking forward to this. I want to dive in. You're going to share a lot with our audience, so very excited. But before we get into the heavy stuff, my sister, I want to ask you, just tell us a little bit about where you're currently residing and a little bit about your family.
Yeah, so again, I wanted to thank you for having me, Tony. And I want to also invite you, you're welcome to, my students call me Professor Ndounou or Dr. Ndounou, but you're definitely welcome to call me Dr. Monica throughout the conversation. So I actually currently live in the Boston area in Massachusetts. Although I'm a native Southerner, I'm from Florida originally. And I'm here, I live here with my family. I have 3 children. And they range in ages from 10, 17 to 29. And they're all just very creative individuals in their own way. And they very much inspire me in the work that I'm doing.
Well, that is fantastic. And look, let's be fair here. I mean, you look fantastic for the 3 kids, and especially a 29-year-old. I mean, maybe we need to find out the fountain of youth that you drinking from that fountain, so I can get a little taste of that. And listen here, this will be fair though too. You know, obviously, you have a fantastic background. And you are doing a lot of great things, and you are heading a lot of great organizations, including your own organization. So I respect everything that you bring to the table. You're very busy. You're in high demand. So the question I want to ask for you, why did you want to come on a Black Executive Perspective podcast, talk about this topic?
Well, first of all, I felt it was important to make the connection between what we do in Black theater as cultural producers, and also the work that's done in the corporate space, right? Very often these conversations around supporting Black theater are grounded in this perception of the field as it being charitable giving, which we are not declining any charitable support. So we welcome that. But I also really want to draw attention to the fact that it is an investment. And it's not just a financial investment, it's an investment in the culture, it's an investment in education, it's an investment in healthcare. Black theater intersects with so many different fields because of the services that are offered by Black theaters. And primarily it is a creative endeavor. This is where art takes place and is made, but it is also a place where people gather to have their souls nurtured and to build community and to learn from one another about our history and culture, which is much more extensive than you would know based on what we get in K through 12 education and even higher ed, and that's likely to be even more challenging in the current climate.
Well, number one, thank you for investing the time to come on. And number 2, I'm excited to dive in to your knowledge and learn more. So are you ready to talk about it, my sister?
I'm ready to talk about it, my brother.
All right, let's talk about it. So, you know, there's when you and I had first met, you talked about Black Theater Day, which I had no clue what that was. So let's start there, right? What is Black Theater Day?
Black Theater Day is an annual day of solidarity and service that was developed to amplify the visibility of Black theater institutions. And one of the reasons that why we do this is, number one, even, you know, as you noted when we first started, that a lot of people, they just aren't aware of the existence of Black theaters. Even when I'm teaching, I have an exercise that I give my students, you know, usually in the fall term, where they have to do hometown Black theater research, right? And the assignment is simply to look at your hometown. Is there a Black theater in your hometown, right? If there isn't one currently, that tells you everything you need to know about America, right? If there is one, right, that also tells you everything you need to know, especially if you can learn a little bit more about what their current situation is, right? And if you can find out if there was ever a Black theater in your hometown and it isn't there anymore, it tells you everything you need to know about America. Black theater is a place where we tell our stories about our experiences as people of African descent globally, but especially within the United States. And so when we don't have those spaces, then we're less likely to be able to share those stories or even to cultivate those narratives in truthful ways that really speak to our people. And so what really inspired it was thinking about through the International Black Theater Summit, which hopefully we'll talk a little bit more about later in the conversation. But at the International Black Theater Summit that we convened in 2018, that event, it was our first offering of the summit, and it was a celebration and reconvening of an event that August Wilson had at Dartmouth College 20 years earlier. And during that convening and in several other spaces, when I spoke with leaders of Black theater organizations, there was a desire to find ways to connect. So, a lot of these theaters, they're, I won't say isolated within their communities, but they're really kind of spread out. And many of them are dealing with some of the same issues. So whenever we can find a space to bring the leaders together, then we try to find out, like, what are some of the things that you're dealing with? What kind of support do you need? And so in those conversations, we just started to think about what is a way to kind of rally around Black theater so that, number one, more people know about it. Number two, more people can support it. And number three, more people can see it and participate in it, right? And again, being an educator and teaching about the history of Black theater, among other things, I'm quite astounded to find there are people who think that Black theater started in the 1950s with Lorraine Hansberry's A Raisin in the Sun. Like, that's usually the first Black authored play that anybody is introduced to, right? People are shocked to learn that Black people have been doing theater, professional theater, in the United States since 1821.
It's time to rethink your protein. AgileLab's protein bars are crafted with high-quality protein, double the leucine, and enriched branched-chain amino acids, essential for optimal muscle recovery. Finally, a protein bar that works as hard as you do. So visit agilelabs.com and use the code BEP to get 20% off. That's agilelabs.com, promo code BEP.
And that's where I wanted to go to, right? Because so here's and I was trying to think of the brother, Paul Robeson.
Yes.
Okay, Paul Robeson, right? And he wasn't in 1950. Okay. He was in the early 1900s, okay? But that's when I think of Black theater, that's how far I go back. But you just went back even further than that, right? In the 1800s, okay? And so let's paint that picture. Okay, because and again, there's probably people who will watch this and listen, and they'll be astute and they'll have some information. But and again, maybe I'm the only person. Maybe it's me. Maybe I'm the only one that's ignorant to the fact. But at the end of the day, I would love for you to take us back, right, in terms of when did it start? Why did it start? I have ideas, but why did it start? And then talk about the prominence that it had for a long period of time, and then weave that picture in terms of the decline, and then we'll dive into all the other stuff.
Okay, absolutely. So first, let's just say the African Grove Theater, it was founded by a gentleman by the name of William Alexander Brown. Mr. Brown was of West Indian background, and he was a ship steward. And he first started doing hosting these tea gardens, which was basically having people come into these like small parties where people were invited and they can come, dress up, enjoy some entertainment. And the African Grove Theater was an outgrowth of that enterprise where there was a real market to try to serve Black people in ways they were not being served. And this was in New York, right?
And this was in sorry, Dr. Monica, but just real, so I just want to be clear. This was in the 1800s, right?
This was the 1800s.
Now, was Black people, just because I want to paint the picture, 1800s, white theater was happening. All right, they were this and that, right? Could Black people go to white theaters? Could they interact in white theaters? Tell us a little bit about that.
So it's complicated, I'll put it that way. And before I even get into that, let me just say, Black people have been doing theater and performance on the continent of Africa for generations, even
so
before all of
talk to
this.
So that's it's right. Bring it all up, my friend. Exactly.
Yes. So I want to be clear about that. So it's not a new invention, and we probably need another. We need another show to actually even.
We need another
talk
podcast show,
about,
right?
Classical African.
I'm down for that. We'll definitely do it. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So I just want to say the roots of all of this are on the continent of Africa, and that you had people of African descent who were telling stories and engaging in multiple modes of performance. And this is a time we have to remember that people are enslaved, right? You still have people of African descent that are enslaved in different parts of this country. And so the fact that you have a group of Black Americans and West Indians in the city of New York in 1821, on September 17th, they opened their first show of William Shakespeare's Richard III. Okay, so during this time, yes, you also had white theaters that were producing a variety of plays. You have Shakespeare was really popular, but melodramas, those types of plays were being produced. The fact that you have a Black company that decides we're going to have our own theater, right? And at times they could witness the production of white plays, like in the balcony, but they were not allowed their own space, right? Or I would say to integrate. So what you have in them developing their own theater space and deciding not only we're going to have our own space, we're going to do Shakespeare. And that was actually a very revolutionary thing. And it wasn't that they were not capable of telling their own stories. It was a business decision too, right? That's what was selling. And Mr. Brown, William Alexander Brown, understood the market. And so he entered the market, created this enterprise, had this professional company of performers, which included James Hewlett, which is one of the most popular performers in the company. And also it launched the career of Ira Aldridge, who was a famous Shakespearean tragedian who left the United States, went to Europe, and became one of the most decorated Shakespearean performers in like the history of the world. And so, and if you go, there are monuments dedicated to him. He was given medals and recognition by royalty. And again, during a time where people were enslaved here in the United States.
Can you hold that thought for 1 second, though? Because here's the thing. I'm glad you brought it up, because I remember you talking to me about this from a Shakespearean standpoint. So if you, and look, you know way more than I do, but I think it was Lawrence Fishburne who played Othello. Okay, and again, probably a couple other dudes that did it as well, right? But the key is like a Black dude played Othello. A Black dude can, do Shakespeare. You understand where I'm coming from? And then you're on here saying, what are we talking about? They were doing this in 1821, right? And so these are the things that drive me crazy, to be honest, right? It's because at the end of the day, how could a Black person be doing Othello? Or how could they be doing Shakespeare? Like, this is not something that we've been doing for centuries. But go ahead and finish your thought.
Right, but that's exactly the point. Mm-hmm. It's why we need people to know and understand that now. So even thinking about myself as a young actor, and when you're in training programs, you're auditioning for all types of things just to be able to cut your teeth on work so that you can develop as an artist, right? And so there are times in some programs where they can't imagine me with my Black skin.
Exactly.
And in that world, in those roles. But then again, I attended a conference in London, and they were saying that was one of the most metropolitan cities in the world for generations. And so there were people of African descent there, right? Even during those times that are reflected in Shakespeare's work. And so when we don't know these things, we tend to have to keep reinventing a point of entry for us to even be included, right? When it's not really necessary. And so for me as an educator, I felt like if it blew my mind as someone who loves theater and loves Black theater in particular, that there was a professional company of Black performers that were doing Shakespeare in the 1800s. And not just that, I'll tell you the story in a moment of what happened to them for doing Shakespeare. But just knowing that, I sat up straighter. I walk in rooms like
There's
I
no
know I
question.
belong there. It
There,
changes everything.
it
And
changes.
so I want my students to know that this is the case, that we're not new to this. Not only were our people doing this before coming to North America, our people had a thriving enterprise in the early 1800s, and the only reason that it deteriorated was due to structural racism.
Yeah.
And the various barriers that that blocked them from being able to just do what other people who happened to be born in white skin were able to just do, without any question.
Let me ask you this. So, number one, thank you for that. You're right. We're going to have you come back because there's a ton of other stuff, and I want to make sure we get to some of your stuff. Here's the thing, though. I just want to dive into what you said. When you found out your shoulders, you sat up taller in your seat, and you felt more confident because you felt that you didn't feel. You now know that this is something our people have been doing for centuries, right? Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, it made you feel good. And it would make, I would think, anybody who's in theater, especially from African-American descent, make them feel proud as well. But here's the other thing, though, too, is that white people need to know this as well.
Absolutely.
Because at the end of the day is that then that can take that shock off. Because here's the thing. You ever see, I'm pretty sure, you saw Hollywood Shuffle, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. And obviously, Robert Townsend was trying to show how Hollywood was limited for black people, and they only could do certain roles, pimps and hustlers and cops and stuff to that nature, right? And so, and why was that? Because mainstream didn't think that they can see them doing anything else outside of that. And so they were limited. So let's be fair, though, too. If mainstream, and maybe they still know, and I'm not saying that would have been the be all end all, but to be fair, but if most Americans started, because words paint pictures, okay? And so if you don't see something, when you think of Shakespeare and you see white, you think that only these people can do it. Right? And so, but if you know that, and it goes all the way back, it's not shocking. So you would be more open. I'm not saying that the roles would have opened up, but my point is that when the broader community understands or is educated in terms of these people or this group have been doing this, and this ain't an anomaly. We're not just this ain't a byproduct of, you see my point here? Where at the end of the day, this is something we've been doing for centuries, and we should be more open to it. And by doing that, and again, I'm not saying it solves all problems, but at least it opens up more doors. What's your thoughts on that?
No, absolutely. And that's why when I'm saying my students, I have students from all over the world. Right, and all of them are just as much moved, I would say, by this knowledge, because what they discover even in hearing about it is first of all, they ask me usually, why did nobody ever tell me this?
Exactly.
Right? That's usually the question. Right? And I'm like, okay, so that's a whole other class?
That's that's podcast number 3 we got to do, okay? That's podcast number 3, but keep going.
Right. So, I mean, there are all sorts of reasons for why that's the case. And, but I say what's most important right now is that you do know, and what are you going to do with that information? And so how we utilize that information for Black Theater Day, which is September 17th every year, again, marking the opening night of the first season of the African Grove Theater in 1821 in New York. And what we do with that knowledge is we just remind people that this is what happened and this is why it's important. And we encourage people to support Black theater institutions. Now, we make a very careful distinction because a lot of times people, what is a Black theater institution? So that's a whole other podcast we could get into.
That's number 4, my sister. We keep climbing.
We'll be co-hosting the show soon. But yeah, so a Black Theater Institution for the purposes that we are discussing it for Black Theater Day is Black-led institutions whose mission is to tell Black stories year-round. Now, sometimes you have theaters, again, with the best of intentions, that may produce their one black play per season. Very often that one play is an August Wilson play. I love August Wilson. We also have a variety of other playwrights that we want people to know about as well. But what happens historically is you have black theater institutions, these black-led institutions that have been founded with a mission to tell black stories year-round. They do not receive the same amount of funding and resources that predominantly white theaters have received.
Can you stop right there on that, right? So where does the funding come from, right? And because you just got, I wanted to dive into the funding part. So you said they don't receive the same amount of funding. Is this philanthropy? Is this government grants? Tell me a little bit about that.
It's a mix of all of those things, but generally philanthropy. I'll give you just some numbers so you can just see just how, I don't want to say dire, but just how significant the difference is. So the Helicon Collaborative Study found, and this is a pre-COVID study, $4 billion in philanthropic support from foundations to arts organizations. Of that $4 billion, 2% of all cultural institutions, all white, 2%, receive nearly 60% of that $4 billion.
Wow.
Right?
2% receives almost 60%?
Yes. So the remaining 98%, right, of those arts organizations, which includes only 4% of arts organizations of color, right? Black theaters are a fraction of a percent within that percentage, right? These organizations split the remaining 40% of the $4 billion in funding. So that's split amongst, this large group, and black theaters are a small fraction.
A sliver of that, yeah.
Right? Yeah. And so what happens, it has this ripple effect. Black theater organizations are vital, valuable resources, right? And I will also venture to say that they're excellent business opportunities too, if people are willing to explore that. But when we don't fund those black theaters, they don't have the resources to continue to tell our stories. And so we had an explosion of theaters that happened, that emerged in the 1960s, 1970s. By the 1990s, more than half of those theaters were gone.
So what was I'm sorry, Dr. Monica, why was the explosion of theaters in the 70s, 80s, and stuff like that?
So in the 1960s and 1970s, you have what's known as the Black Arts, Black Power era.
Okay.
And so what happened, this is like one of the most prolific eras in, I'll say, in theater history,
Okay.
Because what you had is black scholars, practitioners. If you can think of what the historical climate was in the 1960s, where it's a lot of talk and action towards revolution, this recognition that attempts to assimilate and to access not just civil rights, but equal protection under the law, that all of these things are still being contested. And so you have a generation of folks who start to say enough is enough. I'm not going to straighten my hair and try to assimilate into white culture. I'm not, so much focused on trying to integrate into white spaces and alter my appearance or even my way of seeing the world. Like, I'm just going to be me. And in order to do that, you had people like Amiri Baraka, who had his own space, Bart's. You also had theaters like the Negro Ensemble Company that emerged in New York. You had the National Black Theater of Harlem, founded by Dr. Barbara Ann Tier. So you have an explosion of these theater spaces that are emerging, that are catering specifically to black and brown audiences. And in doing so, you had an even more black playwrights that are emerging because they're developing the content. You have, a lot of them have training programs where they're training black actors specifically for performing in black work. to counter a lot of the stereotypical representations that Black folks had encountered previously. And that's just the kind of environment that's happening, and not just in New York, it's happening nationwide. So you had a lot of these theaters that, were emerging in that time and sustained, for, I would say, the life of a lot of these theaters, it's not usually long. Why? Because of the lack of funding, right? That's a significant component. There are other factors as well in individual cases. But across the board, the lack of funding becomes a really big issue. And so, again, there's, in terms of government grants, I will say that, there are sometimes issues with Black-led organizations being able to access some government funding, right? Historically, that's been an issue that's also been discussed. And so what we're trying to do for Black Theater Day is to not just, promote the narrative like, woe is me, and, that sort of thing. The narrative is actually so different. It's how dope are we, right? That's the message, that despite all of that, we continue to come back. We continue to develop these theaters. If one goes away, another one pops up, because every generation we keep fighting to try to find ways to keep telling our stories. And we need those spaces that are nurtured and cultivated by us. Why? Because historically, the pattern repeats, where a lot of these, mainstream institutions, if that's the term you want to use, there's always some point where telling our story becomes an issue. We can't talk about Black history. We can't talk about Black culture.
Right.
And so if we maintain those spaces where we already do that, if we support those spaces where we already do that, we don't have to worry about what's happening in the other parts of the world around that issue.
Because we can control our own destiny. Let me ask you this. So number one, again, I'm going to thank you for that. I have several questions out of what you just got finished saying. So hopefully I can remember them all before we move to the next segment. But historically, who was funding the Black theaters? Was it Black people?
If you like what you hear and want to join us on this journey of making uncomfortable conversations comfortable, please subscribe to a Black Executive Perspective podcast on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Hit subscribe now to stay connected for more episodes that challenge, inspire, and lead the change.
Generally, yes.
Okay. No, because I just want
Black communities sourcing those theaters. There are also times, so for example, the Negro Ensemble Company, they received a large grant from the Ford Foundation in the 1960s. When Douglas Turner Ward, one of the founders of that entity, he wrote this big article that appeared in the New York Times, I believe, that really just talked about issues with Black theater and white audiences. Is Black theater for white audiences, or just raising all of these interesting questions at the time. And that generated some interest and buzz in him and what he was doing. And so he was able to get some money from the Ford Foundation to start the NEC. The challenge is when we rely too heavily on those philanthropic entities, that's also where we get into trouble, because again, just like history has its cycles, so does philanthropic giving, right? And so there are times when, we may be the flavor of the month, and a lot of the resources will come to not the full field, but very often it's a select few entities that may get some support. And then once that cycle is over, it's very hard to get funding from those same sources. So we have to really diversify the ways in which we seek our financial support. And I also think we have to get creative in how we think about support. It's not just money. I think living in a capitalistic society, a lot of times we're really just focused on that dollar, and I want my coins too, just like everybody else, to be able to support the work. So I'm not dogging that. But I'm also saying there are other ways that we can support these organizations. And Black Theater Day on September 17th is the way, it's a reminder to say, reach out to your local or regional Black theater. Find out what they need. They may just say, well, we need costumes for our next production of,
Got it.
you know,
Got it. Got it. Got it.
whatever.
Got
And
it.
so, you know, people can clean out their closets, you know. I have
That's
stuff
fair.
from my
That's
great
fair.
aunt Lulu, you know, who, you know, was alive during that time period. You know, I mean, just so looking at what are the resources that are available, you know, showing up, just showing up at the theaters, attending those shows, buying tickets, you know, and buying a group of tickets so that you can even send the youth to see the shows, or
Right.
populations that don't have the resources to be able to pay for a ticket. And so there are different ways we can support. And I encourage people, like, take that same energy that you bring to supporting the Black churches historically and bring it to the theaters. You know why? Because a lot of those theaters are the space where we're congregating to tell the stories we need to hear as well. And you get, you know, similar nurturing in a lot of these spaces that we get, you know, in our, I'll say in our spiritual homes, just community, you know, opportunities to learn lessons that help you get through your daily life and to help you better understand the world and yourself. You know, opportunities to create and make things, opportunities to develop as a person and an artist. And when we give these things to our children, because again, even in, you know, K through 12 programming, a lot of times the first thing they cut, it's the arts programming, right?
There's no question.
And so
There's
the
no
kids are
question.
not getting that. And anybody will tell you that you need that part of your brain too, no matter what you do. So Black theaters are a great place to start to get that support.
Right, right. Here's the thing. So I hear you, and you know, as you were chatting, I can't say I don't disagree with anything that you said, right? But when we kicked off this conversation, you said something. You said most people think Black theater started in 1950. Okay, so think about that for a second. If most people, even Black people, think that Black theater started in 1950, that means they don't know a lot about them. And when you don't have a broad awareness about it, you can't support something that you don't know a lot about, right? And so let me ask you this question. How many Black theaters are there across the United States? Do you know that number?
To be honest, post-COVID, we need to do a survey to have a real reckoning
Okay,
of where we
so
are
so
with that.
so this is the thing though, because a lot of times, how would somebody know? And you gave your students this homework, right? Hey, find out if there's a Black theater in your community. This will tell you a lot about the community. So how would they find out if there's a Black theater in their community?
Okay, so number one, let me kind of go back and you know, kind of clarify where I'm going with my
Okay,
initial answer
okay.
to that, which
Yeah.
is that there are 7 Black theaters out of 50 states in over 200 years. There are 7 Black theaters that own their own space in the United States. 7.
So the other ones are renting and leasing and stuff of that nature.
Right.
Okay,
And
gotcha.
so when we had the Black Seed Initiative, we had roughly 150 entities that received support from the Black Seed Initiative. And so if you're looking at those numbers, you could say, you know, we have Black theater in some variation, and these are Black-led entities. They could be collectives, and it's not about the building, right?
So they may not own the building,
They
but
may
they
not
have
own the building.
space and they're showing up every week, month, whatever the case may be.
And they have their mission to tell Black stories year round, right?
Okay, so yeah, but even at that
So,
number, like what those numbers look like.
yeah, so I would say based on like, and this was during the COVID period, roughly 150 that I can, you know,
Okay,
I could
okay,
acknowledge.
okay.
My concern is that post-COVID, and especially within this current climate, the likelihood of having even less than that in the next few years is, you know, is highly likely if we don't have the support that's needed to keep the doors open
Right,
for
right.
these theaters. And the other thing too that I try to tell people, just knowing the legacy of the African Grove Theater, right, is important. Knowing that they existed, knowing what they did, knowing why it was important, but it's also critical that we know what happened to them in during their time. Like, why did we not have the African Grove? Because their theater lasted until about 1823, right?
So 2 years.
Roughly 2 years. Now, during one of their productions, the African Grove Theater, let's just say, they started in one space and moved to another because they grew. They needed more space. And they owned their own building in New York City, okay? The space where they were performing was close to another notable white producer's space where they also performed Shakespeare. And when this producer realized how much, the lines were wrapping across the building, because they knew that there were white patrons who wanted to see these black performers. Initially, Mr. Brown was like, no, we're not doing that. But he was also a businessman, right? So he said, okay, I'm going to open up a space in the balcony where you all can come and see the show as well. So not only do you have black audiences who are coming out in droves, you now have white patrons who are some of them come initially out of curiosity. And then they're like just overwhelmed with the fact that, oh my God, these people can actually do this, right? So you have more and more of this happening. The white producer is not happy. He feels like he's losing business because these patrons are going to the show. He hires a group of unruly white folk to go and attend the show. They disrupt the show, heckling and doing all kinds of foolishness. And the law is called. When the law shows up, what do you think happens?
I know the playbook.
Yes.
All right, we've seen it 1,000. You can go Rosewood. Anytime black people start rising, right, then all of a sudden we got to shut that down. So
exactly.
Right.
So what we get is they get arrested. It's documented that they were chained, and as they were led out of the theater, they continued reciting their lines to the play, all the way to jail.
So hold on a second, just so I'm clear here. The white people were unruly. Mm-hmm. The law was called, but the black people got arrested?
You said you knew the playbook.
I know, but I want you to say it. don't code it.
I thought we had established that already. So I mean, I can say yes. Their show in their space that they owned, that the black people owned this space where they were performing. And when unruly white patrons disrupted their show, it was the black performers that were arrested and taken to jail. When they were taken to jail, they were told they would not be released unless they promised to never speak Shakespeare again. So, of course, they agreed, because who doesn't want their freedom? So they agreed, and what did Mr. Brown do? He didn't pack up and leave town. Mr. Brown wrote the first extant black authored play called The Drama of King Shoutaway, which was about an uprising in the Caribbean. And so it didn't, and this is why it's so important to know and understand that, right? The determination that it takes when you're building a business enterprise and you see these structures against you. He didn't run. He just said, you know what? All right, I got you. Here's what we're going to do next. And so they staged this play about an uprising in the Caribbean during a time when their brothers and sisters in the South were enslaved, right? Mm-hmm. So it's very subversive, the work that they were doing. And so eventually their space mysteriously burned down.
And I'm not laughing because that's the gameplay. That's the playbook.
Exactly. Okay? And I say mysteriously, you can see the quotes, right? Because this is how it's documented, right? And from there, the company continued. They continued as long as they could, going from, moving to different spaces and eventually disbanded. Why is that so important to know right now? Because when people look at the issues with funding that Black theater institutions face, it's easy to say, well, they just don't know how to manage money, or they just don't know how to do X, Y, or Z. But if you're looking at, for over 200 years, we've been working to tell our own stories, right? And each time there's a barrier that comes up, we keep coming back. The moral of the story for me is that, like, we are providing vital services, stories that are important to not just our community, but the larger country. Just to know the story of the African Grove Theater, it tells you a lot about how institutions work, what those barriers are, how we've circumvented them, and how they continue to plague us, right? And so we have institutions that get very creative in terms of how they're trying to operate. Several of those, the 7 that I named, they're looking at different business models of how to maintain their space. Other companies, then they realize, based on where they are geographically, it may make more sense for them not to own the space, but to have the resources and arrangements set up in a way that makes it sustainable for them to operate in the way they need to. So it's not a one-size-fits-all thing, but the common denominator is that history of knowing that there are always barriers to Black theater institutions thriving in the United States. But that does not keep us from continuing to do the work and continuing to establish, establish our own sort of models that work for us. And so on Black Theater Day every year, this is our opportunity to say, number one, everybody plays a role in this. You may not be a Black theater maker. You may not even want to be a patron or an audience member, but you can be a patron. You can support the artists. You can support the institutions. You can give time. Like, even right now, that's why I said thank you so much for having me on your show, because you're giving me a platform to talk to people who might not know anything about Black theater and who would love to help, but they don't know how. And so Black Theater Day is an opportunity to learn how you can support.
Yeah. And here's the thing. I think so based on how you've educated us thus far, there's not a lot of philanthropy money. There never has been. And so at the end of the day, it's the theaters are being supported by the Black people, right? And so at the end of the day, for them to survive, they're going to have to be supported by, the African American community. Here's the thing, though, and that's what I go back to, and having you on that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on, is to bring awareness to this. Because I don't think, and again, like I said, I don't know everything, but I'm just, when I'm sitting here listening to this, and look, I live in Connecticut. I go to Broadway and see plays and all different type of stuff, right? I saw the Temptations and Michael, all these things, right? And then you have a lot, I don't want to say, but like the let's use the Temptations, okay? Which is a musical, but it's still theater. The majority of the people in the act are Black, okay? Let's be fair, right? However, where do I go see them? See, this is my thing is that there needs to be, and that's where there needs to be an awareness. There needs to be a history lesson, which you're providing both of those things today. Okay. However, and maybe I need to look, but are there Black entertainers and stars, theater stars? Are they out screaming and hollering and saying, support us and be here and we're over here and check this out? And maybe they are, but what I'm saying is that if, like this podcast, let's be fair, there's 1 million podcasts. There's, was it 2 million? I think it's 2 million podcasts actively. You know what I'm saying? And there are people doing all the time, right? So at the end of the day, you got to be screaming. you got to be out there. You got to be this, that. And then some people are like, yeah, I want to check it out. Some people are like, I don't care. I can go check this out. But the more that it's aware, and there's more that people are aware, and more importantly, understand the history. So I got 2 questions I want to ask you, all right? You talked earlier about how investment needs to be different. Okay? So talk about how we're in the 21st century, okay? And we know you just said the philanthropy, because we may get a little piece, but then they can change the game. And next thing you know, you're surviving on that, and then they cut it. You're done. Okay. So, what's some of the tools that can Black theaters use, or Black institutions, to build these interdependent networks, right? And different type of funding. Is it crowdsourcing? Is it what? Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, this is where I want to give a shout out to one of my collaborators, Sophina Brown at Support Black Theater, who I think a lot of the work that she's doing in the LA area is work to watch and to be a part of. One of the things that she and I have discussed, because again, her work has been more regionally based within LA, and the Craft Institute, my organization, we're looking like nationally. And some of the things that I'm finding is, and again, this is something that Sophina has talked about in her region as well, that it's through collaboration. Collaboration is the future, right? For me, I go so far as to say it's collaboration of people of African descent globally. That's where it's at. So I think we need to have collaborations with different entities and across sector. And this is one of the things Sophina talks about a lot, which is the recognition that Black theater institutions, I started out talking about some of the things we offer in terms of education. By nature of our very existence, we end up doing social justice work, right? And so collaborating with entities that are doing social justice, education, healthcare, just any other industry we intersect with.
I got it. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
so we can get creative about what those intersections look like and intentional. That's how we work our way out of this predicament. Right? And I think it's going to take strategy. We'll have to try different methods, and see what works, but also just learning from the past. Some of this stuff has already been tried in other eras and other periods, right? And so that's why if we work together, when you have people who are historians, like myself, and people who are working in economics, people who are working in political science, people who are working in medicine and health, then we can look at how do we combine resources across those fields, and also looking specifically at some of the things we offer in the community, right? And so one thing I do want to note, a discovery around the fact that individual donors, we need more of those. Right?
No, I
and
get
for
it.
whatever reason,
Yeah.
within the Black theater space, it's not like, so for people who go to church, like there's maybe 2 or 3 offerings that's going to happen in the service. Right? Look, I'm not shading anybody. I'm not shading anybody.
But
I'm just saying.
It used to be 1 offer, and now it's 2 to 3, right?
Well, because here's the thing, though. There's a recognition that in order to do the work, you need the resources, and it's not a shyness about asking for it.
No, and that's the key, though, right? My point is my point is that at the end of the day, one offering used to pay the bills. Now they got to do 2 to 3 because people are not giving as much in the one offering. You see my point here? And so they need to do the same thing to get the same amount of money so they can, that's my point, right? That's how because there's less people going to church today, right? Years ago, pretty much every family went to church. It was 70, 80%, right? And so one offering would be it, right? But now when the numbers start dropping to 40, 30%, right? And the buildings cost and everything, all the costs are going up. You need the 2, 3. That's what that's just a fact. Right? That's a fact.
And that's an excellent point to make. And me in bringing it up, the reason why I'm bringing it up is to say that for those of us who were raised in environments where you go to church as a child, you are trained early. You're giving your little penny, your 50 cents to go up there and put in the offering, and it's embedded in your mind that this is part of the practice of what we do, right? And so bringing that sentiment into the space of Black theater, just in recognizing the value of what it brings. Everybody, it doesn't matter how small your offering is, right, or what it looks like. It's the fact that it's in your heart to give and support and sustain this. And it's even more critical that we have that impulse. Because again, you know, like history is in cycles. We're in a cycle right now. A lot of Black theater institutions, and I just want to name this, a lot of Black theater institutions lost their funding from the NEA when NEA terminated funding for a lot of organizations. My organization was hit as well. And so what we look at in this moment is to say, yeah, this is what's happening now. Guess what? We've been here before, y'all. We have been here. And so there's no need for us to panic, you know. It looks really, really bad, but if you think about what happened, you know, during Reconstruction and the ways in which whatever progress we were trying to make, there was this, you know, backlash against that. It happens. And so what I'm encouraging people to do is to, you know, just be encouraged, stay encouraged. Let's keep our focus on what we need to do for us, you know, right now, and how we sustain each other and our institutions. And let that be the lesson, you know, for this. For me, I was going to say it makes no sense, but that sounds so judgy. But I get really frustrated when I find that we're kind of like in the same predicament that we've been in the past, and we haven't quite figured out how to navigate it, you know. And so I want to encourage us now to, you know, just pause, take a breath, because I'm not saying it as a form of judgment. It's actually a form of encouragement to say, we already know. You talked about the playbook, Tony. You know, we already know what tends to happen. If we are, and again, there's so many of us in different places that have the knowledge and the tools to be able to understand what's happening and be able to do something about it. Let's find ways to come together to do that. And I think us organizing around supporting Black theater institutions is a great way for us to do that. Because again, it won't just feed and fuel the theaters and the production of art and culture, which is very important. It actually touches everything else we are and everything else we do. So
Right. Here's the thing, my sister. Number one, thank you for that. I still go to awareness, all right? And I try to, so I'm sitting here listening and I'm processing and then I'm thinking of myself because that's the only thing I can control is me, right? And so I'm thinking, okay, I'm just being honest. I wasn't aware. So I'm glad you're here. You're educating. And I'm like, okay, where can I find a Black theater, right? So I'm just thinking on this. But let me throw something big at you before we close. You brought up a really good thing. You said collaboration. Mm-hmm. And maybe these things have happened there, and maybe they're not, right? But, you know, you ever see the movie The Bingo Long All-Stars and Motor Kings? Mm-mm. Okay, it was with Richard Pryor and Billy D. Williams.
Okay, yes.
And so they were Black baseball players in the 40s. Yeah. I'm dating myself, my sister. So they were Black baseball players in the 40s who couldn't play couldn't play in the major leagues. Mm-hmm. So what did they had, you know, certain areas had their own Negro team, but they would barnstorm. And they would go and take baseball and travel around and provide their talent to people who didn't have a Negro League team, right? So so this is my point here, from a collaboration, is there let's get together and then let's do a barnstorm and let's do a road show where we're going to 10 cities across 2 months, and we're going to be doing theaters, and we're going to show what black theater is about and this and that, where you educate people and you make it more aware, right? And then this way you get the, like, I didn't even know that was around. I didn't know this. And maybe some of the plays are the history of the African Grove thing and all this type of stuff. So you're doing both. You're creating awareness and you're providing history lessons, right? So then this way it makes more, then people are like, oh man, this is great. Where can I find one? Oh, is this one here? And they're run down. Hey, I want to go and help because I want more. So has that ever been thought of, done? And maybe it has, but this is what I'm thinking. Because my thing is, I think this is that doesn't mean it's going to solve all the issues, but I think it's an awareness situation for the most part.
Yes, I think that's fantastic. There's a whole other history lesson around like the Chitlin Circuit, the Urban Circuit.
Is this podcast number 5?
Yes. But I'll say there's a project that we've been producing through the Craft Institute in collaboration with the African American Shakespeare Company and Support Black Theater, and it's called Echoes of Us. And what it does is it's like this living, breathing collection of narratives that are written by multiple writers, some emerging, some established, and performed by cast of actors that work in stage and screen. And through Echoes of Us, the work is written in the voices of our ancestors, our family and community, those who haven't yet been born, for us to really think about what are the things we need to know about ourselves and how we move forward. And so that's one of the projects we're doing. I know there are other people who have different projects as well, but the thing is, if you can't keep the lights on at home, how are you going to travel the country?
No, and I get that, right?
And
But
so,
I totally get it.
Yeah, but you bring up a valuable point. This is something that people can support, right? And so if you want to get specific.
Yeah, and if people can collaborate, maybe when there's one group of people who are doing well versus another theater, right? And to your point, one can provide something that the other. All I'm saying is, I just think a lot of this is awareness. I don't want to use the word a lot. I just think there's an awareness issue. Let's just say it like that. There's multiple issues, but there's an awareness issue because nobody can help something that they're not privy to. Okay, nobody can go to something that they're not privy to, and so I think that's the big thing, the big issue in terms of, and you coming on the show is a step, and you've probably been on a ton of other places. And look, I love, this has been, excuse me, this has been so educational, and I'm just thinking like, okay, Tony, how can you support it? What can you do in your control? How could you help? So I love to have you come back. And because I think you're onto something in terms of the collaboration, right? And I think, there's no saying 0 times 0 is 0. Okay. And if you put a bunch of people together who have 1 or 2 and 3 and one person, and maybe one got 0, and now you got 10. All right. And then that 10 can be powerful. So final thoughts, Dr. Monica, final thoughts. What do you want to leave the audience?
I want to leave the audience with gratitude, number one, for all of our people and all that you do in the various, especially within the corporate space. I've also worked in the corporate space, so my hat is off to you for what it takes to live a life working in that space. It, to me, is just as challenging as any other field. Because a lot of times people talk about the field of theater, and artists and that whole struggling artist narrative, which that needs to be shifted to, because that's not true either. But so I'm leaving in a space of gratitude, and also with an encouragement to look into. I give you all the same research I give my students. Find a Black theater either in your hometown, in your current community. Reach out to that theater, check out their website, find out what they need, and also what they have to offer. There might be a business opportunity in there for you. And also welcome you to be in touch with me at the Craft Institute, and just to learn more about what we're doing and how we're supporting organizations year round as well. But most importantly, on Black Theater Day, I want y'all to get online. Let's make Black Theater Day go viral. So you can actually follow Black Theater Day on the Instagram, and you can, all you have to do, even if, you can donate money directly to Black theater institutions. And again, these are Black-led institutions that their mission is to tell Black stories year-round. I'm not referring to institutions where they may do one, Black author play per year. They're going to get other resources from other places. So find those institutions, donate directly to them, go on social media, amplify the posts. Even if you don't post something specifically, just share or repost and tag people and encourage them to do the same thing. Because again, as you keep saying, Tony, awareness is a big factor. The more you all can help me spread the word, the better it is. Because I can only say so much. I can only be in, one place at a time, and I only reach a certain number of students per term. And so if we can all just have our own grapevine about Black theater institutions, why we should support them, not just on September 17th, but every year, all year. That's what we need to do, because these may be the last spaces where we will be able to truthfully tell our stories unfiltered with live audiences.
Amen. 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 Dr. Monica, you've been fantastic today. I felt like I've been I've been given homework. Okay. But you being here and keeping and educating us and keeping the history alive and sharing about institutions that have been prominent throughout history for African American people, and the need to support them now has been fantastic. So I just want to thank you for coming on a Black Executive Perspective podcast, sharing your perspective, but more importantly, sharing your love for your fellow human being and being an example of what we want in this world in terms of people that really care about other people and are willing to go out and do whatever it takes to make it happen for them. So thank you a lot.
Thank you. I appreciate you so much. And I'm just really just happy to be here and looking forward to the 5 other podcasts.
That's right. Oh, my God. Maybe 10 after that, right? Because I got a million questions. All right. So I think it's now time for
Tony's Tidbit.
And so the tidbit today: Black theaters are more than stages. They are sanctuaries where our past survives, our present resists, and our future takes shape. Supporting them is not an act of charity, but an investment in our cultural economy, our businesses, and our collective power. And you heard a lot of that from Dr. Monica today here on the Black Executive Perspective podcast. So don't forget to check out the next Need to Know by Dr. Nasinga Burton. Dr. Burton comes on a Black Executive Perspective podcast where she dives into the most timely and crucial topics that shape our community and world. Things that you don't have time to figure out. So tune in to gain insight and deepen your understanding of issues that matter to you. You don't want to miss it. Here every Thursday on a Black Executive Perspective podcast, Need to Know with Dr. Nasinga Burton. And don't forget to definitely check out our powerful round table of Pull Up, Speak Up, where we have bold, unfiltered voices to tackle the most provocative issues, sharp perspectives, real talk, and a call to action. We have people to get together and they're sharing, just like Dr. Monica, sharing their perspectives. So this is not just an episode, it's a revolution. So check out Pull Up, Speak Up here on the Black Executive Perspective podcast. So if you've been a active follower of BEP, you either watch us on YouTube or you listen to us on any of the podcast platforms, you know our call to action. Our goal here is to help eliminate all forms of discrimination. And for us, our call to action, this is something, as you heard Dr. Monica talk about, a call to action for the Black theaters. This is our call to action that we're asking everybody to incorporate, and it's called LESS, LESS. And so L stands for learn. We want you to educate yourself on racial and culture nuances. Learn about people that's not in your network, that don't live in your neighborhood, right? So this will enlighten you. And then after you learn, you have the letter E, which stands for empathy. Now, since you've learned, now since you've become enlightened, now you can be more empathetic to your new friends because now you understand what they've been going through. And then the first S stands for share. As Dr. Monica says, now since you've been enlightened, you want to share with others. You want to educate other individuals on what you've learned so they can be enlightened as well. And then the final S stands for stop. We want everyone to stop discrimination as it walks in your path. So in other words, if Aunt Jenny or Uncle Joe says something inappropriate at the Sunday dinner table, instead of sitting there being shocked or giggling, you say, Aunt Jenny, Uncle Joe, we don't believe that, we don't say that, and you stop it right there. So if everyone can incorporate less, LESS, we'll build a more fair, a more understanding world. And guess what? We all will see the change that we want to see because less will become more. All right. Don't forget to continue to watch the Black Executive Perspective podcast on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, and follow us on our social channels of LinkedIn, X, YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram at A Black Exec. For our fabulous guest, Dr. Monica White Ndounou, all right, for coming on the Black Executive Perspective podcast. I'm Tony Tidbit. We talked about it. She educated us about it. We learned about it. We're still going to strive and thrive about it. We love you. And guess what? We're out.
A Black Executive Perspective.